Thank you. I was looking where to stand here, not to get run over by a train. So I think it's safer over here. Thank you.
Yes, also there is the camera.
Huh?
It's the camera.
The camera is through here, right? All right. Sylvia, do we know that we have a good sound for those who follow?
There has been no complaint so far, so I guess we're doing good.
I hope that means that they can hear us.
It worked very well this morning. That's why we
Yes.
decided to not go for the mic.
I think
Here
it.
we go. Sound is perfect.
Right. You're right to remind Anders and Sylvia for the remote attendees, just to inform you that it's a silent participation on your side. But if you have any comment or questions during the discussion, just don't hesitate to share by chat any questions.
Did you change?
Yes.
That works. Okay. Okay, hello everyone, both in the room and remotely. My name is Anders Selling, and I'm Secretary General of DATA4PT. First, I'd like to say that it's been an interesting journey with this project since we started. I think the first discussions were in 2018 or something. And for me personally, it has also been a journey both with DATA4PT, where I started 2016, and then coming also into this huge project, which was quite difficult to grasp, both the scope and how we should go about everything. But it's been step by step, a learning experience, I guess, for all of us. And I'm just reflecting also about the presentation this morning, that we're doing quite well, I think. I think it's also a project that will bring a lot to end users out there, because it's all about the high quality of mobility data, travel data, etc. That is the benefit of anyone that will travel from A to B, choose not to take a car. So this is the opportunity then to share a bit what the project has achieved so far. So just as introduction, also I would like to give my regards from both Effe and Anastasia. So I was the lucky one to be the substitute for both of them. But I would like to say that Effe is from UITP. UITP and DATA4PT has teamed up as associations in this project from the very beginning. And I must also say that this has been a great cooperation between the two associations, not only in this project. And as maybe not all of you know, but UITP is one of the founding members of DATA4PT. And then Anastasia has put in her heart and soul into this project, and unfortunately she is sick this week and regrets that she couldn't come, but she has written a number of questions and advices for us on email from Manuel, and I will ask you to pick that up during this afternoon session.
She's online, by the way.
Hello, Anastasia. I know you can't hear us, but I'm only saying good things. So, and then about Siri and NeTEx, and we also have something called DPFS, and there are probably other formats as well. There's legislations, there's a number of things that needs to fit together, but that's part of the challenge that we have in this project. And I didn't make those slides, and it's always very dangerous to say we have all under control. I would never say that, but I think the feeling right now is that we are at least managing all issues and all problems and every opportunity that comes up. Does this change by itself? This is the next one, right? So very shortly then about DATA4PT, the project. A total budget of 2.5 million euro, approximately, whereof the funding is 80% from the European Commission. Time spent 2023, so we're going towards the last year of the project. As I said, UITP and IT4PT has teamed up as associations to administer and to support the project. UITP as the overall manager and coordinator, and IT4PT for the technical support and technical management. And I won't read through the countries, but we were in total 9 member states, I believe, in the project, and then we have a number of stakeholders also as observers. So the vision then, it's a project with quite, I wouldn't say it's a clear vision. So the purpose is to facilitate the member states' implementations of ITS regulations, and then also to share best practices and to support each other to make this happen. And as you have noticed, who have been part of the project, it's quite different between countries, the experiences that have been made, and some are, we could describe it ahead, and some haven't come that far. And through this project, we have been able to help each other to speed up the implementations. And the vision and the ultimate purpose is to enable interoperable exchange of travel data across EU, and in accordance with the directive, the legislation, the regulations that there is. Manuel, can you change the slide, please? Thank you. So, different ways or different deliverables from the project has been to build the capacity through trainings and the knowledge base, the wiki page, to capture and to simply document and share the knowledge that we have and that we are building. And then we have another interesting part here, which is we will talk more about during the afternoon, and that's the validation tools, because we speak a lot about data formats and that we have interchangeable data or interoperable data, etc. But what comes next? I mean, when now more and more data will be available, it needs to be correct, because if we have faulty data or bad quality, it will affect the end result, of course. So in any, we have the same discussion for other types of data within IT4PT, that this validation is very, very important. And we took this step in the project and engaged an external partner or external supplier that has built and now delivered the first validation tool for data. And I hope we can conclude this afternoon that we have quite good experience with that. And then the exchange, that simply offer the opportunity to exchange data in those stakeholders fora, and bring people together, even if we have had the challenge now with COVID and lockdown and remote, which has, of course, made it more and more difficult. But it's one of the important objectives with such a project, to offer this opportunity to simply simplify the exchange of experience and knowledge. And then the last one, that's one we haven't concluded yet, but part of the project is to find a sustainable solution. So we have, during the project, we have financed and we have organized the support to member states and stakeholders, everything that is related to the standard serial NeTEx, to the implementation and the validation, etc. But after the project, there is no sustainable solution yet. So that's something we need to define and decide upon. And I can speak for, I mean, IT4PT is actually an example of this, because IT4PT comes from the EBSF, European Bus System Future, the EBSF2 project, also financed by the European Commission. And after the project, or during the project members decided that they would found an association to bring the project result further. And that resulted in the foundation of IT4PT. And we have said, Emmanuel is the one who has been there from the beginning. I came in 2016. So we saw a parallel there, and we also see synergies. So we have said that if it's considered as a reasonable and viable solution. IT4PT could actually take this role after the project to continue basically what we do today to support the Syrian NeTEx standards and transmodal, and as well the support to stakeholders within the community. So, but that is not decided yet, but that's being worked on. I'm not very lucky with this one today. So next slide.
No, that's the last one.
It is the last one. Okay. Thank you.
You're lucky.
So let's then move over to the next, and that's Victoire Champenois, who is, we haven't met either, even though we've been in contact since the beginning of the project. But Victoire is representing DigiMove, correct?
Correct.
Correct,
Yes.
and it's behind the setup and the financing of this project. So
Yes, thank you very much. And good afternoon to all of you also from my side, physically and online. As Anders, you were presenting the DATA4PT project, which really supports us in the implementation of a delegated act from the side of the Commission, following obviously the Green Deal and the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy. We are also working on the revision of the legislation of the MMTIS delegated regulation, and we are also advancing to see what should be done to help the development of ticketing and MDMS services. And this is what I want to present to you today, the state of play of the advancement on those two key revisions and proposals. I don't know if you have the slides, if it works.
Yes,
Otherwise, yeah.
You're still on the stage.
No problem. I can also do maybe without slides if I just see them. If it doesn't work. I will just take my computer and do it the rest.
Now they're online.
As long as I can follow, I guess it should be fine. Yeah. So I think the first point indeed, and we will share also the slides with all of you, was to highlight a bit the synergies in the work that we are doing, and try to highlight what we are doing in the revision of the ITS directive. So the ITS directive is really the framework directive from which stems all the delegated regulation, including the MMTIS delegated regulation. And the ITS directive is currently being negotiated. We are under a technical trilogue. And for the revision of the MMTIS regulation, the key point is that in the ITS directive, we propose that the Commission mandates to digitalize certain data categories, and specifically there will be a requirement to digitalize to make available access node. So this will be a big change also for the future in the implementation of MMTIS. So this is one big element. Within the ITS directive, we have also very recently reviewed the FTTI delegated regulation, where in the same logic as for MMTIS, you have requirements in terms of making certain data accessible on national access points. And with the revision of MMTIS, we are therefore trying to align as much as possible, remove data category from the MMTIS delegated regulation as they were maintained in FTTI. So specifically, data categories related to recharging and refueling, or data categories related to tolling will stay in the FTTI delegated regulation, whereas in MMTIS, we will integrate all the data categories related to parking. So this is one of the big changes also that will happen with the revision of MMTIS. And then I think I was referring also to synergy with the MDMS initiative. I have mentioned it briefly, but MMTIS is really looking at the data sharing on information, whereas with MDMS, and I will dig a bit deeper into that, we are really looking further at commercial agreement and ticketing agreements. So the revision of MMTIS is planned for Q2 2023. I have already mentioned one of the key elements, coherence and alignment with RTI delegated regulation. The question of standards will also be further looked into in the context of the revision and minimum compatibility requirements. We had question around this in Article 4 and 5. Since you have a reference, of course, to NeTEx, SIRI, Inspire, and other standards. But there is a reference also to the fact that there should be compatibility and interoperability with other standards. So this is something that we are currently discussing with member states to understand to which extent there should be requirements and how can we control that other standards are fully compatible with transmodal standards. So this is something that we are looking into as well. The question of data quality that we will discuss today is extremely important for us. We will try to make the text a bit more precise, most probably also refer to the work that we are doing within the NAPCOR Working Group 3 on data quality. This is what was done in the context of RTTI, and most probably also a reference that we want to introduce in the new MMTIS text. Demand responsive transport. In 2017, when we drafted the MMTIS Delegated Act, when you look at the annex, at least from our side, not everything is very clear, and not all types also of transport, of vehicles, sorry, are fully integrating for demand response. So another point in the annex to be assessed and to be potentially modified. And then the key changes for the revision of MMTIS are the introduction of new static data type, specifically in terms of access condition for bicycles in vehicle, occupancy as well. I know this is a topic that will be of interest for many of you. This is something that came up with COVID, and that's really important. We know that in Germany, they also have a quite advanced project of this, introduce a requirement to share data on occupancy, and the question of adding also the requirement to share real-time dynamic data types on the national access point, which is already done in certain member states. In France, I know that in the Loi L'Homme, you already have this requirement, but to extend this requirement to all member states. So this is what we are currently discussing in MMTIS expert groups meeting. And again, the objective is to have a proposed text for Q2 2023. Is it working now? Ah, super. That's going to be easier. Thank you. For everyone as well to follow me, I think. Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. Yes. So just to say that this is what I was trying to explain, a bit the framework and what I was trying to highlight, but much easier with images, the relation with the ITS directive, MDMS, rail passenger rights, other horizontal legislation, and the AFIR also regulation, which is under negotiation. The link with the mandating of data availability under ITS, the link with MDMS and the rail passenger right obligations, and the key point for the revision of MMTIS in Q2 2023. Yes? Yeah, maybe I can stop here and then we move to MDMS if you have questions on MMTIS already.
Exactly the question. I did just see, right, that for MDMS you will also have a proposed text in Q2. So these timelines align?
Yes, exactly. I'm coming to that. So indeed, for MDMS, the objective is also for now to have the text, a proposal from the Commission for Q2 2023. We don't have exactly the same requirements for a revision of the Delegated Act and a new regulation, but we are trying to make sure that the timeline will align because it should be it should come together. There is a clear coherence. For MDMS, our objective is to present the policy options and the policy measure of the text. We wanted to do it before Christmas, but it seems that it was too ambitious, so most probably in Q1 2023. The impact assessment staff working document for the new regulation needs to be presented to our internal regulatory scrutiny also in the next year, Q1 2023. On the initiative on MDMS, I think a lot of you are familiar with what we are trying to do. We want to look at enhancing comparability and access to all mobility products. And we will look at multimodal services, which are both B2C and B2B. So content aggregators as well for all modes. So it means CRS, GDS, meta search engines also for aviation in particular. The key objective for us is really to try and set a framework that will facilitate the development of those services with friends principles when you enter into a commercial agreement, fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory. This is what we discussed in under the MPMF expert group, and this is a particularly challenging exercise to define what is friend when you resell tickets. One of our key objectives as well is really to ensure that as a passenger, when you buy a ticket through an intermediary, through a third party, you are not penalized, you get access to all the information, and you are also, in fine, nudged and helped by those services to use more sustainable modes. In terms of the problem drivers, I will not detail today the policy options and policy measures that we are considering because we still need a full validation from our hierarchy, but you can already see from here where we are heading. We want to really address the lack of unwillingness to share data and to enter into a commercial agreement. So most probably for certain type of operators, most probably for the largest operators, certain obligation to enter into commercial agreement, open distribution interfaces to address this first problem. The second problem, looking at the technical challenges and the question of standards, most probably also certain reference standard in legislation. So when one party, be it the operator or the MDMS, requests it, the other party has to use the reference standards. And this is really to bring down the cost of integration and facilitate, enable really the development of services. And also harmonized commercial contract. This refers to the development of certain fringe principles, as well as the development of clear enforcement contact points, a bit in the logic of what was done in the context of the Data Act. And finally, and this is, I always come to this point last, but I should change it, it should be the first point. Our objective with that is also to make sure that digital services really promote sustainable transport and nudge behavior towards rail, towards public transport, towards active mobility. So there will be also requirements for those type of platforms to share information on greenhouse gas emission and most probably guidelines to include active modes and to align with sustainable urban mobility plans. This is quite challenging because how do you make sure that the platform aligns with SUMPs? I know that in certain countries they have been reflecting around this with licensing agreements in France as well. Again, you have this reflection. So this is also something we will be looking into either through guidelines or through stricter requirements within the legislation. I cannot give you more details, unfortunately. Again, this is to be validated, but you have a flavor of where we are heading, and hopefully you will see a text in 2023. That's it from my side. Yeah. If you have questions, happy to take them.
Thank you. Thank you, Victor. And really sorry for the technical issue.
Yeah, the start maybe was hard to follow, but I think it was okay.
Are there any questions for Victor before we start? Yes, please.
Fabrizio, nice to meet you
Yes.
in person. We talk about several times remotely.
Yes. Yeah.
Just concerning the delegated regulation that you mentioned is under review. Just a confirmation, is the timeline still remain let me say, the same of the past delegated regulation. So we have at the end of 2023 all the categories data required by delegated regulation available at the
So in terms of what we have currently in the text, which was agreed already and it was a great proposal, we will not change it. But as regards requirements for new data categories, this is exactly what we are discussing with member states. If we introduce a new data category, for example, on occupancy, we'll have to negotiate by what time is this realistic to have those data accessible on national access point. So what is currently in the delegated regulation will stay, but for new data categories, we will negotiate new deadlines. Yes.
And in the case that there is no actual format for the current data on the delegated regulation, you have information about vehicle sharing. At the moment, there is no real format because there is an extension of the NeTEx standard. And the timeline is also the end of 2023. So we have a problem because there is an expectation and there is no format available at the time.
And we have a similar problem also with cycling infrastructure,
Yes.
which we are aware of. But I think member states know that we have been quite flexible in terms of enforcement. Okay. You saw that.
So you ask us to be a bit flexible.
No, what I would say is there is the expectation, but we know that there is this challenge with the standards and DATA4PT and NAPCOR working together. This is why we pushed also in the context of the work program for NAPCOR to work on the gaps, the existing standard gaps, where we see that there's no standards, but there is requirements in MMTIS. So we hope that NAPCOR will be able to bridge the gap. And of course, then we are flexible in terms of enforcement when we know that there is no standard.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have another question about European companies. When you have, for example, one airline company can provide data on just one national access point, but we have quite various regulation in our own countries. So how can we deal with that? Is it respectful to just respect one condition on one NAP when you provide all your data on this NAP for all the European countries?
This is exactly one of the topics that this is a topic that was raised for a while within the MMTIS expert group that we discussed with member states. And again, I'm sorry because NAPCOR is always our answer to everything. But it is true because it's a tool to help us implement. But we push that topic within NAPCOR. So we have all of the member states in NAPCOR. So it's the place where they can agree. How do we deal with that? Do we decide that it's the country where the flight is leaving that when you have to put the data on this NAP? Do you make link to the country where the flight is arriving? So just a simple formula that everyone can apply, that you as an enforcer can check easily. This is what we are asking NAPCOR, and they are actually providing us feedback on the advancement of this work at the next MMTIS expert group. We requested that we have a bit more information on where we are heading on this as well. Because it has been an ongoing topic and we want to solve it just with a simple formula. Yeah.
You just mentioned the rail passenger rights regulation. Could you tell us in a few lines what the overlap is for the data part with the let's say MMTIS regulations?
Yes, so in the rail passengers right regulation, you have obligation to share certain dynamic data when you already are in a commercial agreement. So you are an operator and you have a commercial agreement with the ticket. You have in the annex a list of real-time data that need to be shared.
When everybody has open data, or?
No. When you have a commercial agreement.
Okay.
So you are already in an agreement, you have a list of minimum data that need to be shared. So in that sense, you also have certain requirements for infrastructure manager to share real-time data. So in that sense, if we then now mandate that in MMTIS, all dynamic data such as departure, disruption also needs to be shared on the NAP, you would have an overlap. But when we negotiated the rail passenger right regulation, by we, it's my colleague in B5, we anticipated that we were going to review MMTIS, and we knew that we wanted to do that. So actually, in the rail passenger right regulation, you have a line in the article saying that if the data is already shared on the national access point, then all the obligations are complied with.
Okay.
Yeah, voilà. So that's the point.
Thanks.
And I just wanted to say, my colleague Petra is here as well. I just wanted to introduce her to all of you, and she is actively working on MMTIS revision.
I still have a question. NAPCO is gathering all the member states, but many information is in fact under the hands of local public transport authorities, and how the responsibility of local authorities shall be taken into account in the future MDMS. Shall it be put under the responsibilities of member states to decide how they share the information with the local authorities, or shall the responsibilities of local authorities be mentioned, knowing that most of these informations are provided under public service obligations, which gives the responsibility for the relationship with passengers also to the this regulation.
So just to understand better, are you talking about obligation from local authority to share information data or to share ticketing data?
Well, in fact, they have the responsibility for the services they provide,
Mhm.
including the fare policy decisions, and also informing passengers about services which are provided in their urban area.
Mhm.
And they are not on the same level, and they may not be always on the same line as the state itself, due to the fact that you have different governments in the various member states, more or less decentralized, more or less coordinated between local authorities and member states. And as the local authorities are not participating currently in the various projects, how their opinion could be taken into account, or how, which kind of relationship and which kind of involvement or mentioned in the legislation.
So I think there's different questions in your question, but from what I understand, sorry, and I have to.
I think we just about to run out of time, so if we can.
But I'll wrap it up very
Yeah,
quickly.
yes, please.
Just to
Yes,
say that
please.
in MDMS, we are still trying to look whether it will be only long distance or also local areas which are obliged to share data. So this is one thing. If there is no obligation at local level, then this doesn't need to be referred to. And just to say that the logic of MMTIS as regard obligation for local authorities, it's member states who have the obligation to check and enforce properly that this is done. So it's in the hands of member states, and then we check from the Commission side. Voilà.
Thank you very
continue.
much.
Many thanks, Klaus. So let's move ahead, and thank you, Anders, to be the timekeeper.
Yes, I realized here that I might be the one responsible for the time management, but it's also very important with the questions. So thank you for that. Next is you, Emmanuel, to talk about EU multimodal data models.
Yes. Okay, so let's. Oh, no, no, let me share it for you remotely. It should go. Okay, so great. I will do it quite quickly, just to try to save some time. That's just to inform you about the progress around the data model update. So, okay, that's just a quick reminder, but just to remind that what's going on around the data model update is basically what's managed here around the knowledge base, the training, all the capacity building relating stuff. What's important also to remind is that DATA4PT is linked already with other projects, initiative, associations. So we already spoke about NAPCOR. There are standard expectations from European Commission around it, as you understand previously. And of course, what we produce in DATA4PT is directly, let's say, connected with NAPCOR. We are also, we have also some, let's say, liaison with the mobility data, the Canadian-based association dealing with the Google-based GTXF format, with the rail sector, SUERA, and with formal standardization bodies, which are the SENS, NeTEx at the European level, that's basically where it's produced the Transmodel series, and ISO for the worldwide part. If we just focus a little bit about the SEN process, just to remind how it works and how the formal SEN standards are developed. So this is taking place under the Technical Committee 278, Working Group 3, which basically means all what's dealing with ITS in public transport. And I have the pleasure to be convener of this working group here. And we have under this umbrella all what's related to Transmodel, SIRI, and NeTEx. So basically, this means that such standards are specified inside this working group. But that's also where takes place the OGP, Open Journey Planning part, the coming OPRA for the observed data will take place here, and also all what is about onboard data communication. So basically what IT4PT supports today is coming from this group. So Transmodel, nothing new for you. I hope as well you are quite familiar with the reference data model and the related data exchange format for static real-time information. So that's how we structure such ecosystem. Important news regarding the current updates and extension of the standards. So just to highlight the fact that the alternative modes extension or extensions have been published very soon. And this concerns the part 5 of NeTEx, so the static data, the formal TS 16614-5 is now released and available through SEN, CEMELEC portal, and all related national standardization bodies as well. And we have the related Transmodel part 10, so all what's dealing with the data model, which have been also delivered accordingly regarding the alternative part. So that's of course a quite important extension as it offers ready to now address all alternative modes, which means okay, cycling, as you can see in the picture, but also deals with bike sharing, with car sharing, carpooling, etc. So all alternative modes are managed, including also the EV, electric vehicle charging point. What's going on right now? We are working on two profiles. So as a reminder, the profiles are just a subset of the formal standards addressing a specific functional scope. So it's really a way to have a sort of a guideline in order to implement the standards according to, let's say, a defined scope and related rules. And it already exists, the famous EPIP, European Passenger Information Profile. You are familiar with it. It has been the first one produced at European level. But right now we are working, okay, let's start with this one, which is EPIAP, which means European Passenger Information Profile for accessibility data. So it's a profile dedicated, focused on accessibility elements for the static data. And we have at the same time SIRI, European Profile, so SIRI for real-time information, European Profile for passenger information. So both are right now in a formal working draft status at the same level. So it means that it's under review by the member states, by some of you right now, and should be, let's say, published in coming, let's say, month early 23. According to the same process, we should have these two profiles published as a formal European. Also, and this is, of course, supported by the DATA4PT. We are also, in the frame of DATA4PT, delivering some proposal for standards updates. So that deals with, let's say, also the systematic revision of the transmodal theory and NeTEx, again, according to the same process. And thanks to DATA4PT and all feedbacks we collect from member states implementation and stakeholders implementation around transmodal theory and NeTEx, we can merge, collect all together the inputs to deliver such synthesis of standards update proposal to feed this systematic coming revision of the formal standards. And just to conclude around it, just to remind that DATA4PT has delivered, is delivering, and will continue to deliver some training programs. So we already delivered successfully 4 trainings dealing with transmodal theory NeTEx, and the last one, which took place last week, was dealing with the alternative modes to introduce NeTEx part 5 and transmodal part 10. And all these webinars have been registered, so all material, the records, and presentations are made available on the DATA4PT website in the knowledge base page. And I take also the opportunity to invite you next week on the 6th of December to join next webinar we plan, which is dedicated to the validation tool. And that's exactly the scope of today's stakeholder forum. So we will, during 1 hour next week, in the afternoon of the 6th of December, present the current status of the validation tool, which has been delivered by DATA4PT, and which offers a way to check the consistency and compliancy of the NeTEx data sets according to NeTEx profiles. So all the information are available again on the website in the knowledge base, so you can have access here to the tool, to the webinar records, and to any other relevant material. There is as well a more detailed technical database, a wiki-based page to check more detailed information. So that's in few words where DATA4PT is right now regarding such technical material and standards updates related to the documents. Thank you. So now we can enter in core part of this workshop, which is dealing with some, let's say, shared experience around data quality and validation process from different member states and stakeholders. So I'm very pleased to invite first on the floor our 2 keynote speakers for today. So Patrick Dejaco and Roberto Cavaliere, please join and share the experience of Bolzano around data quality.
So thank you. First of all, we would like to share with you a little of experience what we have as a small region about new standards, and with new standards, mostly how we deal with data quality. So we are, how I told you, we are a small region. You will see it then on the map. Okay. So who we are.
Again.
There we are. So it's a small region. It's the province of Bolzano in Italy. So we're on the border to Switzerland and to Austria, the most northern province of Italy. It's German and Italian speaking. About 70% of the inhabitants are German speaking. 25% are Italian speaking, and we have about 5% that have the same language as they have here in Switzerland. Yes, Ladinish. But just and they're passing the Brenner line from Munich to Verona. It's just about 500,000 of inhabitants what we have. Who we are STA, that's our in-house company of the province of Bolzano, and mostly we are building up some railway lines. We have projects, we're building up train stations and so on. Most trains that are traveling around in South Tyrol belong to us, but Trenitalia and SAT are traveling around with them. We have also a driving security center. We deal about green mobility with sustainable mobility, that's pedestrian, bicycle and e-mobility. And my department is called so-called information systems. And we deal with passenger information and with ticketing. But pass over to Roberto.
So good afternoon also from my side. Roberto Cavaliere from NeTEx Park, which is this beautiful, let's say, technological park in South Tyrol, in Bolzano. So traditionally, our region was also famous for agriculture, tourism, but then the politician decided that we had also to invest in innovation. So their idea was to put all the most innovative companies there, or research organizations there. And our role is a little bit to coordinate this ecosystem and to support organizations like STAR in the implementation of innovative projects. And that was the case. So we started this cooperation in 2016. And in 2000, we had finances to the RDF funding, so project called Bingo. And the idea was to create a new digital architecture for public transport in South Tyrol in our region. And in 2017, we decided to implement this kind of architecture. I underlined 2017. We decided to use NeTEx, Siri, ITXPT on all the onboard components, so all the vehicles. Then we introduced also the OGP for the journey planning with another project called Linking Apps. But here the idea was to define two things. First of all, clear responsibilities between all actors, so PTA and PTOs, what have to accomplish, which components they have to control, which kind of data they have to exchange. Second, clear protocols to be used, clear exchange of data. And third one, which is still an issue for us, but what is currently ongoing, control of the architecture, meaning that we have a modular architecture with different components that we can interchange, also supply from one supplier to the other one, and have to be interoperable through these open standards. And so we decided, so then there was a process from 2017, definition of the architecture, and then was the rollout step by step. We implemented all the different system components. Now we are at the end of this journey, hopefully, because we are at now fully in the implementation and the rollout of this new ITCS and ticketing system you can see here in orange. And in a couple of weeks, we are going to make the first acceptance test with the first set of buses, full ITXPT compliant. And there's very, very short time, in 5 minutes, the experience of a couple of years of experience learning.
So implementation, what means implementation? So productive NeTEx, we use the German profile, and in short time we will use also the Italian profile, but German profile is already productive for 2 years now, and Siri, we will implement then Siri next year. And OGP is already running in a beta phase with the Linking Apps project. So I think that's the decision was for us quite easy, because we always had the lack we couldn't interchange data with other ones, and we had the other issue that we have everything is multi-language with us, and with the VDV protocols it was very hard with that. So we decided, first it was quite the decision wasn't hard for us to go on the European protocols. But now we would go on the topic what we are talking today. So we are a small region, but we have 3,000 stops 5,000 stop points, 200 bus lines, 6 railway lines. And how do you deal with all this data? And if you want to interchange data, you have to have good data quality. And we have some really some advantages in our region. First of all the data, all the timetable data is defined by the authority. So no operator defines the timetable. And we have one central database for everything. That's the so-called DIVA system from the German supplier, MMTIS. Maybe you know him. And in this DIVA system, we have all the stops, all the timetables, we have all the tariffs in there. And on the database are working 3 employees of the autonomous province of Bolzano that they are putting in the timetables. But that's not good enough. So what we see then, what we saw then every day, we had a lot of errors in there, we had some issues and so on. So we built up within this STA, what is also in-house of the province, it's belonging to our company, we built up a data quality team. And there we have more employees than the province of Bolzano. So we have 4, they have 3, and what they are doing is they check every day the data quality of our data sets. And I will show you then later on. So for example, georeferencing, content and logic checks, corrective actions are doing those 4 people. Then if everything is fine, we can publish it. So on our travel planner, we can make the export 462 for our data warehouse or for the operators, or we can print also the booklets, however everyone does it. But how do we check then the data quality? First of all, I would like to show you the modeling of that's just a small example of a small train station in Unico with just 3 tracks. We have some stops. We have an area of bus stops, other bus stops areas. So we do the whole modeling of the stop. We have some entrances. We have the single stop points, the blue ones. And all together is this then the train station. So then we can define all the interchanges, the time when you change from the track and so on. And we believe this is very important for data quality. So if you have then the interchange, you need to know how long does it take to get to one point from the other. And we do this for every stop. Next thing, in our database, we do every night about more than 50 checks. We go into the database and we do some semantic, some logical checks, what could be wrong on the data, because we know that the timetable technicians, what we call them like this, they make a lot of errors because they think, okay, the timetable is fine, but then they have forgotten something. And what we do is then we make all these checks in the night. For example, if it could be that the mean of transport is wrong, that is missing a vehicle type, that the stop point is on the wrong side of the street, and so on. And all these checks in the morning, they will get then a report, our employees, and then with maybe where we are sure that there are some errors in, or maybe there is something wrong, and they have to check it. So then in the morning, they check everything until we have no errors in, and they do this every day because the employees of the autonomous province of Bolzano, they're working every day on the timetable, and every day there comes out some errors. And we believe then if we have to make them in the night to make then the exports, and we have to have then really a good data quality, and without this it would be impossible to check everything. So I think this is really for us crucial to have these checks in the night. These are also only qualitative checks what we make. This is our journey, what we are doing. I just want to highlight out where we are. So we started with the standardization of the new architecture, how Roberto told before. Then the passenger information, we did a lot about passenger information. There we pointed out on the top of the passenger information is high data quality for us is really important. And then going further on with real-time information and so on. What we also did is then a monitoring. So we have a data warehouse with an operators portal that we can see how the operators work with certain KPIs and so on, and penalties on them, on that. At the moment, we are in the phase of ticketing with the rollout of the new ticketing system. So next week or in 2 weeks, we will have the factory acceptance test of our new account-based ticketing and ITCS system. And where we want to go further on next year is then all the topic of mass.
Yes, just to give also a small overview of, so this does not mean that we are already preparing the background for these new things that are going to come. As NeTEx Park, since more or less 10 years, we already created an environment which is called Open Data Hub, which is a local mobility data space here in South Tyrol, because we had the vision to start opening up all the different data silos available in our region. So that we had a lot of legacy ITS systems, for example, parking areas and so on. We decided to collect all this data in real time in an open platform, creating an open source project with all local companies, with all local public organizations. So to have a technological background in which different organizations can work together, coordinated by us. And now we have this platform in which also startups, so companies can have the possibility to get this data and to build new products and services on top of that. We are also building some, for example, demonstrator. This is a demonstrator of an intermodal journey planning based on all this data that we have, based on open source technology, Open Tree Planner, and so on. Just to give a vision of what do we want to implement in the next years. So this is also a vision also for start to say, okay, that's what is technological possible to do with the data once we have them. And
it is very important about just one example about data quality. First, a couple of years ago, we put in our database into the point of interest of our region. But that's not our domain, I would say. What are we using now with the travel plan? Are we using now the Open Data Hub? And they have the tourism. The tourism puts in all the points of interest, all the restaurants, all the hotels and everything. Yeah. So we don't have to deal with this, and we just use this service from them. And that's also part of data quality. So just you have to bother about your domain and not the domain of someone else.
And we see that the innovation here is the contamination of different domains, exchanging data and using data from different domains. So the idea of the Open Data Hub is not just to be limited to mobility, but as Patrick said, we also have tourism data. In the future, we want also to add agricultural data and other, let's say, data from other domains, because then, so we believe that this is the basis for innovation. And for the lessons learned, I give you, Patrick, so that you can conclude.
So we have learned, of course, some lessons. I think we need data formats. I think it's for everyone is clear here that we need data exchange in future and now, and we need good ones, I think. But without data quality in the data format, it doesn't work. So we see it in some various projects where we really have problems with the data quality of others. Also, we have sometimes some data quality issues, of course, and I think it's really important that everyone knows it's not only about technological things, not only about data format, it's also about what is in those data formats. And this is not, you don't have to do it once, you have to do it every day. So data format is data quality is a continuous process. And last point for us, it's very important that we think that if you have a database with a lot of data in, if you have rich data, then you also have to have rich data formats, and vice versa. If you don't have rich data, it isn't good enough to have the NeTEx maybe where you can put everything in. You have to really, the starting point is to have rich data. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. fantastic. So yes, we have a question from the remote audience. Thank you, Stefan, for pointing it out. Does the checking process also fixes the data, or must it be fixed by art after reading the report?
It's semi-automatic. So some of the reports they can check, they can fix it also, but we always have the control over it. So we don't do it in a full automatic way. No.
Great, thank you.
I have a question which is quite similar to this one. So if I understand properly your data quality process, you have a systematic daily control operating during the night.
Yeah.
And then you have daily report, which is sent to the data quality team.
Yeah.
And they're doing checks. Are they the ones doing the data cleaning? Or
Yeah, they do also then the data cleaning.
Okay. Okay.
So sometimes if something gets out that you have to modify a timetable, so maybe they send it out to the colleagues of the timetable technicians. But if it is about how if the stop point is on the wrong side of the road, so they took so they will do this. So it depends always, but most work we will do. We check it and we fix it.
Check and fix.
Mhm.
And I have another two-side question. This process of data cleaning and improving on the continuous process, do you define like typical discrepancies which leads to typical data cleaning actions?
Yeah.
And then you build some like blocks when you have this type of situation, you should fix it this way. And then
yeah, it's like this. So we started with maybe 10 reports, and then we saw some issues, so typical issues, not once, then twice, then maybe 10 times. Then they said, okay, that's an issue, what we have not only once. So we build out, if it is possible, we will build out a report for that, so you can check it every day.
So you have the data cleaning on the continuous process daily, and then maybe you find some discrepancies that you should fix on the long term.
Yeah.
So,
I have also a question. We have seen today, let's say, multiple presentations of systems built on transmodel-like databases and effectively using the same kind of tooling to represent those stops and stop areas and eventually errors and lines, etc. Is your solution, for example, available for a different country or different region that they can use it as a best practice? That you just can copy the solution instead of rebuild another data check?
Yeah, I think it's could be reused. Yes, yes.
It depends on the scale, in my opinion. Maybe if it's a much smaller scale than South error, maybe it's too much. But from scale, probably also slightly bigger than South error. I think that this kind of solution can work.
How do you define then the reuse? So
Exactly.
if you have a database.
Let's say NeTEx puts everything on GitHub, and then you can check out and you can run it. That's then it's been quote open source. The other way around would be, would you be able to offer these services to different regions?
So I don't know. It's
It's a business model.
yeah, it's a new business model for
So
start.
what we do is, so we have this database from a supplier, and we enter quite deep in the database. So, but all the checks what we are doing, so they are homemade. So they are SQL records what we have. So we are open for that. So if someone uses also the MENS system, so we can share it, of course, no problem with that.
So actually, this would be a MENS pitch, as in we sell
Yes,
this basically,
exactly.
and you can put this BI solution on top.
But you could take it away from MENS and see what kind of checks and double checks are being done. So look at the questions instead of the operation.
Yeah,
And then you could also turn those questions open source and scale it up to the level which you think would be.
But you may know that we have a validation, let's say, meeting I think next week. So these are the rules that we would like to have in the ultimate NeTEx, let's say, timetable check mechanism.
We'll talk then later on about that.
Again, question concerning when you described the mix of data in the Open Data Hub with the tourism, one, etc. You described your formal and structured process for the quality check. If, like in this case, there are a mix of different type of data, my question is, does it make sense to, let me say, associate an indicator, a quality index, something like that, to highlight the quality process behind the publication of those data? I mean, in your case, the mobility data are very checked in deep dive. I don't know, probably tourism not so in deep dive. So you could have a quality index for your data 100% and tourism 50%. I don't know.
Well, maybe I can. Yes, because data quality is also a topic for the Open Data Hub. What we are building now is also some automated tools to check the quality of the data entering in the Open Data Hub. Now that also some use cases are being built on top of the Open Data Hub, it's just not a research and development environment, but also commercial services are starting to be built on top of the Open Data Hub. So now we are also having this kind of need. And we want to implement now this instrument that also for the data provider that shares the data with the Open Data Hub can have a feedback. Okay, I can check the quality of my data. For example, if I have a data set in the tourism and I have a certain fields that have to be filled, I can check, okay, for 100%, 100 point of interest, I have 90 that have all the fields with values and 10 point of interest which have low data quality. And we can then also provide this information also to data consumers that are using this data and say, check, well, have a look that this kind of data maybe don't have the accuracy you need for your kind of implement. It depends also on the use cases. Maybe for some use case you need very accurate data. For other use cases, it's sufficient. But we wanted to provide this information in a quantitative way. So we are working on that.
So you clearly have sophisticated quality and data exchange for timetables and stock data. How much sort of data quality checks have you got for fair data, and what formats are you using to?
So not so much at the moment, because we're now implementing the new system. So just these days, but what we have in this DIVA system, we have I would say the master data of the tariff. So we have all the stops with the tariff zones, and we have the distances between the tariff zones, and we do some checks also there. I couldn't say now for the moment what we are doing exactly there, but we make some. If every stop has an assignment to a tariff zone, that would be a quite simple check. Yeah. But I can repeat now. So if there is someone out there who uses the same MENS system as we use, so just you have the contacts here. So just contact me. We are open about to share all this experience what we have.
Patrick, is the DIVA system similar to the NOVA system in Switzerland?
No. It's the NOVA system is about tariff, and DIVA is mostly stops timetables, and so on. And they have something about tariffs also in, but it's not the same.
Okay, so thank you again.
Thank you.
Let's move on. Okay, so now I'm pleased to invite Fabien to come and present the feedback from France from RLT.
Just a quick word about the timing. Scheduled to end at 16. Yeah, can we run over?
I will just mention the room.
I mean, for all of us.
Yeah, I will just mention that one today because it was a joke afterwards.
So yes, we have a series of 4 presentations right now. Let's try to do it in 10 minutes to leave some room for questions. So please. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Does it work?
Yes, it works. So quickly the framework, regulatory framework for what the regulation body of transportation are doing in France about data. In fact, we have two missions. One on the opening of mobility data. The other one is about that mobility, multimodal digital mobility services. So we have something in France with the Mobility Act, which is quite the same as the MDMS, but it just at the local level, evenly just the regional level. So that's a choice of the France to put the checking of the MMTIS regulation on an external body, which is the ART. That's a choice. I don't know why. I have to write it, but they have chosen that. And as an independent regulatory body, we have not just in mind the control checking, the control, but also to regulate, in fact, the opening of mobility data. In fact, to make that available for reusers and really usable. So we have a strategy. 2022 was our first campaign of control. So our strategy is based on a public consultation we have made last year. It's also made on the control test phases we have also made last year. And the goal, in fact, it's to provide a lot of data, because you said to have enriched data exchange, you need rich data. In fact, to have data exchange, you need data previously. And we have at this step in France. So our first goal was mainly to publish all the static data for public transportation in France, then to make an incentive on dynamic data, because we know that we have a lot of dynamic data in France, but it's difficult to publish them. So we try to motivate the public transportation authorities to publish this type of data. And the second goal, it's in fact to have better quality data. But at the moment, it's not the last level of quality. It's just to make an automatic validation of quality, ensuring that the data set it's coherent by itself. You have not excessive speeds. You have not a lot of double stops, etc., like on the GTFS datasets. So our first focus is data. In fact, the opening of data, it's a gradual process. At the moment in France, a lot of data are coming from local authorities, yes, or regional authorities, because in France, a lot of regions have chosen to aggregate all the data coming from cities or metropolis inside of the region. The other type of data sets are coming from vehicle, so vehicle sharing, car sharing, etc. Some about transport operators, not a lot, but it's in fact really important because that's the railway companies, it's the coach companies. At the moment, not really the airways companies, because I really don't know if they know that the regulation is existing. I'm not sure that IATA is not a fake on the regulation, because I'm not sure there will be a IATA format. And the last provider, mainly for dynamic data, is coming from the operators of information system. It's better than to have an access with dynamic data using directly the informational system operator. So at the moment, we have a lot of data set coming from public transportation authority. It's quite 2/3, but it represents around 90% of the population of these public authorities. And what is our main problem? It's that main data are coming from GTFS format. You have here the data providing by GTFS, so it's 83%. Just 70% are coming with NeTEx, and it's worst for dynamic data. It's quite the totality of dynamic data are coming from GTFS. Why? It's because, in fact, that's the choice of the national assessment. They give the possibility in France to publish in both formats, NeTEx or GTFS, in order to have a better reuse. When we have made the public consultation, users said us, we just use GTFS. NeTEx bullshit. We don't do that. So in the beginning, perhaps it's a good idea to have both formats. It's better to have both format by the origin and not dual translation. But at the moment in France, the NAP is providing a translation tool to convert the data set from GTFS to NeTEx. So perhaps it's a good idea. I hope in the future it can be different. I hope in the future that users use NeTEx and Siri. It's not really the case at the moment. Even for SNCF, our national railway operator, they said us that they have problem to put the data set in quality because there is no users of the data set coming from NeTEx, just user with GTFS. So that's why we have made a control on GTFS format, because it's mainly a translation for NeTEx. So it's better to control the origin data set and not the translated data set. So we use for that validation tools. You know why? Data sets are really huge. It's impossible to do that manually. So you have to use validation tools. In validation tools, in fact, you have two kinds of validation. One kind is that I can call the description or that way makes the data set readable. You have to describe the data set, you have to respect the format, and you have to have current data. So that's the first step of validation. The other step of validation is to have data quality indicators using the data itself, so to compare the speed, to compare the data stops, etc. When we have used on this area 5 validators, one is our own validators, and we have used the NAP validator and mobility data validator. So we have, in fact, different results coming from different parameters inside the validators. That's one of the problems, but it's also a richness because you have quite the same indication coming from each validator. It's just a result which is a bit different. So in fact, it's interesting to merge all the validators to have better indication about the quality data in the dataset. When you make a focus on the format, in fact, we see that a lot of producers try to provide more information than necessary. So they add optional files in GTFS. It's quite the same when you have NeTEx profiles. You want to add data using the NeTEx standard. And when you try to add something without enough knowledge, perhaps you make something wrong. And that was the case when we have a lot of optional files. Some files are not existing in the standardization of GTFS. So that is a problem if someone wants to read it, but sometimes it's not really a problem if you just read the no optional dataset, files on the dataset. The other conclusion is that we have a lot of producers who have not put their last dataset. We have a lack of currentness. So, and when we analyze inside the data, we have found that there is not a lot of error for the main part of the producers. But sometimes some producers have a lot of errors. And when they have a lot of error, it's some data fields. you have, in fact, a lot of data fields which have some errors. So it's mainly very good when you see the percentage of errors. But we have, in fact, 2 data sets in our last control with more than 0.5% of the values which are wrong. So when a producer is not has not enough knowledge to put in place a data set, we know that we have a lot of problem in the beginning. And after that, we have made a comparison between NeTEx and GTFS because in France we have in translation. So the goal was to verify that the translation was good. And in fact, that is the case because we find quite the same values when we compare for some key indicators of quality. We have quite the same value. Sometimes it's different because the understanding of stop area are not really the same between NeTEx and GTFS. GTFS has a problem with stop area because it just considers stops and not stop area. So in NeTEx, we have both kind of information. So I can say that in France, the translation was quite good and we have quite the same values in both formats using the translation. And we have also made a comparison between our own NeTEx validators. We have made that, in fact, we have copying the GTFS validator adapting to NeTEx. And for the beginning, we have used an open source XSD validators called XLMNlint, which is not as good as DATA4PT one, but it's one open source possibility. So we have quite the same result for a lot of data files here, but for the data files with a lot of error, in fact, we have one problem, is that the XSD validators we have used is not good as the DATA4PT one. And the other problem is that we have not considered that certain values in the NeTEx format are not considered. We have considered that as good. It's not good for the DATA4PT validator. So the interest is when you have a lot of validators, you can compare, you can make an evaluation on your data, on your validation tools. But perhaps in the future, it was a beginning for us just to make the validator because there is no existing validator for NeTEx and Seri on the market, not open source. And the interest it's at the end, it's to use, in fact, the official validation tools, perhaps DATA4PT, perhaps that which are available on the French national access point, and not to develop our own validator because it's a bit costly and not efficient, I think, in a long-term session. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabien. Any questions? Yes, please.
I don't understand if your validation process is an automatic validation process or done by hand on the received files.
In fact, we have 2 kinds of validation in France. One is automatic on the national access point. So you have a tool, and when you put the files, the data sets on the national access point, you have a validation coming from the validators made by the national access point. As a controller, I have to download the data set I want to control, and after that, I use automatic tools to put the do the validation. Start automated tools, but I have previously to download the data sets I want to control because I don't control all the data sets.
Can I make a question?
Yes.
Do you plan also to specify the data in the future, the data quality with which all the different data providers have to provide you the data, and not just the standard format with which they have to use to provide this kind of data? Because I think this goes also in line with the new with the new regulation and so on. I think this is also a key point.
Yeah, I agree with you. We have spoken of that in the National Standardization Commission this morning.
Okay.
I think that is not on the end of a control. I have not to define what is a quality indicator. I have to control when someone given me the quality indicator, if the quality indicator is good. So I think that can be made by the national access point, or better, using guidelines for the regulation. So that is for the European Commission. I think guidelines with perhaps a common understanding of what is quality could be a good tool, in fact, to promote that on the national assessment. But I think guidelines is the best to do, and perhaps after we can make something at the national level. But that is not the goal of a control.
Okay.
So adding a comment on that, I was amused to see that you have certain regions that are much lower quality than others. And we had a very similar thing in the UK with stock data with different regions, some good, some terrible. And just by naming and shaming, so you just by publicizing with this is a list and so on, and then you have regular meetings of people just using sort of peer pressure to sort of name and shame can be very effective. So,
yeah.
So, but I think the take home from that, it's important for the validator tools to kind of record the statistical quality metrics against the source region, so that you can exactly that kind of social pressures.
Yeah, so in fact, we published every year a validation report giving all the statistical indicators. So the goal is to make naming, not a shaming at the moment, but mainly a naming. But the problem, in fact, to do naming, you have to give the information to all the people involved on the process. And at the moment, in fact, the process is not very well known. When we have made our public consultation, we have just 35 answers. And we have more than, I think in France, perhaps 4,000 producers of data. So only 35 has answered the public consultation. And I think the only which have answered are the only one who knows the regulation at the moment. So the regulation is not very well known. On the airway transportation is really don't know. For public transportation, it's really well known, but for other data, it's not well known. So we have some problem with that. To publish data, you need to know that there is a regulation about.
Okay, thank you again, Fabien, and we'll try to also continue discussions after the other presentations. There are a few questions also which are being sent remotely, so we don't forget you guys, but we just take these questions later. Okay, so I now invite Antonio Matos to come on stage to share the experience from Porto.
Hello, everyone. Okay, I come from Porto. We are a metropolitan area for Northern. You are in partnership with MT, is our National Mobility Institute, with constructing the NAP, the National Access Point. We are a very starter project, and okay. Okay, this is where we came from the north, and this is the area we cover in the north Portugal. We are the second largest metropolitan area in Portugal, and sorry, can you change my hand? Okay. These are our national system, are the companies who are operating. These are metro, these are trains, and these are bus. These are our internal operator. We are here. You are working only with private operators, bus private operators. Now, We are controlling concessions of 22 bus operating and these numbers of lines. This the area we are covering. This is overlap area between us and STCP, and this is only STCP area. All of those are independent, okay, from the council. There is no independent budgets, independent decisions, and that is a problem. Now we are in the new model and the future. Today they are signing the first contract. We are changing from between operators for 5 bus operators in networks. Because in this we have not the network idea. There are concessions. Some operators have 2 lines, 1 lines, 50 lines. Everything is a nightmare to control all that. What our mission is to plan the lines, to establish the service agreements, establish the tickets and fees, make the contracts, service monitoring, payments of the obligations, and public information, not direct, but as a producer to others. Because we only work with a narrow area of information, of all the information. This is a system we are start to building. This is the main platform. This is the planning information platform. Our first plan is to make this working directly, but it makes very dependent from this platform because we want to change this planning platform. One way we think is to make NeTEx a communication standard between that. That is the where we do all the controlling of the operating, and where the operators will send the NeTEx information to the operator, because we are the ones who construct the lines, the service, the bus stops, all the things are us. The only thing that the operator is being done is to make the operational plan. Calendar, shall do, etc. And here you have the open service that will be NeTEx and City, and also get the FES, because you need to be at both the worlds in our plan. Why NeTEx? White collar transport system areas and domain independence is one problem. The model we are trying to work in is to have data collaboration between the municipalities. They do the bus stop attributes and so on. We done the design of the network is our missions, and they are the metro and the STCP doing that and try to collaborate all that. And for that, we have to have a common base and a common ID identifiers to do all that. Object-oriented data model. We think GTFS is a very not too oriented, but a very SQL data model. And being oriented data model, we can implement in NoSQL databases and all that, and that is a strength we find. The frame concept, the independence of working, we do that, and this is one thing we integrate in our flux. The version mechanism, transmission as a payload on the file, okay, because we can integrate the GTFS as a payload service. If you get an NeTEx, a GTFS is files in a zip file, not a payload, a direct payload. Of course, Portuguese data standard and the full European standard. What are the weaknesses? The complexity for someone restarting is very hard to start navigating in a text. Small presence in commercial software. I suppose someone after I've talked about that, and that access can be very huge. There's the diagram you have implemented. Here is the planning design platform. We produce independent site frames and service frame. We have the platform, that big one platform is air here. Here is some validation of what we have produced for our cell. Is implemented in the internal model. We have the internal data models. We are not fine of conversion also. Someone else talk about that. And we have a service to the operator to get the NeTEx, the service frame and the site frame. They produce the service calendar frame and the directography, and they input over those. If they want a new line or have a special requirement, they put here. We design, we make all the IDs and all the stuff, and always when some data is presented, you get a notification. It's already, you can do the calendar frame and the service frame. And here is the auto. That is not a PIP. That is, we start to stay still in NeTEx, but we need more information than a PIP, because you have our model. We implement some minimal requirements with frequencies and lot data, and you need. But here you have a PIP, a resource frame and composite frame by line of all the data there. What tools we are using? First, the training material is very important. Data expert team support. Stefan is one on the person in the start, and I asked a lot of questions, and they oriented me. It was very difficult in the start to understand, and sometimes I make a question, he gives me stay in the standard. So we have to have a step back and change your mindset to modulate the information, because sometimes this is a problem. We have a mindset and we stay as very difficult. So we step back and reformulate all of the things. Examples from others. I suppose I have a database of all the seeds they are here. I've just everyone. And but there is one I have must refer. It's Norwegian, the Norwegian now, because their documentation, I suppose, is very well. It's very well written. But the lines is not exactly the way we think, and we copy things from others and for others, and we start to build our result. The graphic interactive documentation is our menu to pull the things, and the data validation tools that you use the Docker version. There's the diagram to produce a NeTEx. We start the information we need to exchange. We start all the documentation. We make a NeTEx sketch by an editor with a small example. Three bus stops, one line, something like that. We put in the validation. If it's okay, the report announced. If you need correction, you go study what we have done wrong. After that, we make all platform program adapting or programming, generate a NeTEx from the platform with real data, put another time in the validation the tool. If it is okay, we make adoption. If not, we compose the full to try to identify exactly where is the error, because sometimes there is many errors. So we divide that until identify where is there, and we back do those. Always small blocks on the text, divide to conquer. So you can identify, because NeTEx files can become very huge. And if you try to have that kind of validation in that NeTEx, it's a nightmare to identify, because we have a lot of errors. Sometimes it's only one error, but it generates 23 another errors is all the same. Now you are passing for the internal development team and external development team. So this is the thing I talked before. When you get a real NeTEx, we put in this. This team is this external development team is the team who is working with our big platform we call PLIM. Okay, the PLIM, and we give them. They put in the validation tool. Of course, they are already validated here. This is not correct because the first time they use XML validation on general XML we actually with some examples, and they don't get the same errors that we get here. These tools very difficult to talk. So they adopt the same validation tools, and now it's easier to talk with them because they import the service to internal model, they export, they put another time in the validation tools. If the no errors is approved, if errors, they send the reports to us because the problem maybe is here. Okay, and is because we always use the JSON report in the validation tool is the reason. And now we are start to work. Today we are signing the first contracts, and we are starting to work with the operators. So we are invited to them to adopt also the validation tool to certify their models before they send to us, because it's much easier to have a lot of errors in the source, always resolved and not in our work. What is the questions in the notes you need from a starter point of view? First, I believe a technical manual or with all the prevalent information written for starts, because I think that is very begin stuff and you jump for very technical stuff. There is no document in between. For someone like me, that don't come from the systems, the traffic systems, I come from the GIS world. It's very difficult to understand. If you have this kind of, I have this guy, if you have this kind of stuff, it will be easier to make the conversion. And I talk with others. They all like most of the time GTVS because they don't understand, I suppose, NeTEx, because I think there is a lot more easy. It's easier to understand. It's easier, a lot of material. In the validator, what is the recommendation? The profile with which the file was validated. I'll say in the report, with each ECP, NeTEx, like a NeTEx, because sometimes to talk with each other, the problem is we are not validating with the same profile. In the NAP ecosystem, and it's sometimes asked to the future, right? Or can an app, an application, use the NAP model? I'll say I consult a lot of NAP for other counters. If I know the lines, I can get information for that. But where I can automatically, without a HTML page, get all the structure of the systems. If I don't know, if I am an application, I go to HTML, I consult the maps, everything, etc. But in an automatic world, how can I get an entry point when I can get all the structure, the main structure? Maybe it is, but I couldn't find that. If there is any identified security risk in the NAP world or in Siri, okay, most of the teams guys can work with me come from DATAX. In DATAX, there is a security model implemented. I don't find anything in the text. I don't know. I'm a starter. I'm a dummy. I don't know if there is a problem. If it is there any common security model to resolve that, or can each other have their own security model? Okay, there is the notes. So for orientations and from the dummy guy. I can answer any question that you have.
Thank you. Thank you. So we can just take one or two questions right now and others later. Oh, okay, so we can directly switch to the next presentation then. Thank you again. So let me now invite Benjamin from Austria Tech on the floor to share the experience from the Austria lab. So, let me just share it.
Let's test. So, welcome also from my side. My name is Benjamin from Austrian. And we have in Austria the situation that we have a multimodal data system about the whole country, but no NeTEx profile and no NeTEx export. So I will show you the history process of creating a NeTEx profile and also the NeTEx export and what was the key challenges there, including the validator trails. So what do we want to achieve? We want to have a NeTEx export based on the timetable, the network of the public transport, and the transport line itself. It should be conform to delegated variation for the multimodal data and information services, and it should for sure be conform. And we started this activity around 2 years from now. And what is the situation in Austria? So Austria is a very small country, but we have 9 federal states. We have one data collection system, which I show you in advance. And we have one user interface for whole Austria to use this public transport data. If you count the data providers, it is just 7. It is because the eastern side of Austria is merged 3 federal states to one data provider. Here you can see now the data collection system. So on the left side, you see the data providers, the data collection system, which is provided by MENS or developed by MENS. And here is the magic happen. Here is the NeTEx and also GTFS data file produced, which is then provided to a web service and a data platform to the whole public authority or public users. And as a national access point, we are also referencing of this data system. One specialty here, we are not providing just the NeTEx data set, we are providing also the schema file for the NeTEx profile and also information for the NeTEx usage. So this means if someone is interested in the data profile of this NeTEx format, you can download the schema file and can use it for sure. So, okay, it wasn't good. Okay, that's fine. And now I will show you how we achieved this. So we have on the right side, we have the data system, which is provided by the Mobilitätsverbünde Österreich and developed by MENS. We have the public transport NeTEx export here as an object. We have us, the Austrian Tech, as a sparing partner for the development. And we have on the left side, the DATA4PT project, including the validation tool. So while we are developing the NeTEx data export file, we have several iterations to test it, to validate it, validate the content, validate the schema, and also validating the validation tool itself. So we have 2 feedback loops here. We have one feedback loop in the direction of the Mobilitätsverbünde as a data provider, and we have a second feedback loop to the DATA4PT project. When we started this activity in October, the validation tool think the first usable version was already online. And the question was to us as a project member to provide feedback. And we use this situation that we include this feedback loop for the validation tool in this whole process. So how it is then done? So first of all, the NeTEx export file was produced based on the standard EPIB schema from the EU. And this was then manually checked by us, and this, first of all, the schema and also the content. And we used then, after finding some errors and issues, using the validation tool to find the same issues. And the discrepancies were reported to both sides. So both partners has the change to improve their own systems. And we did this around 10 times, 11 times. And after all, okay. First of all, the test procedure. Yeah. And what we did in this validation process, first of all, the schema validation. So we use the software Altover XML style, which is a proprietary tool to validate the NeTEx schema against the EPIB schema, well, the NeTEx export against the NeTEx schema and the EPIB schema. So, which shows already some minor issues in the first export of the data system. In the manual content validation, we had the focus on the real information which is included in the NeTEx file. First of all, so the header, so which header is used, how is the body developed, and what is the code structure in this NeTEx file. Then, furthermore, are the EPIB headers existing? And then, for sure, also the data parts. So, are the lines existing? Are the names correct? Is the type of the line correct? Is it a bus which should be shown? And also, is the time schedule included? And then we have also some detailed validation. So, for example, is the combination of the data owner and the operator possible in the real world? Excuse me. And also, are the station names existing in the system? Simple example. Most of in the first export, most of the stations just have numbers in the names, which is not good, for sure. And then after the first correction of the minor issues, we built an FME script, which is also a software for data analysis and data export and data transmission, which shows then if the data is in the correct order, is the time schedule usable, and is the data operator providing all his data, for example. The result of this FME script is an Excel sheet with all the necessary information, with the time schedule, with the station names in the correct order, with the operator, with the line owner. And we did then a comparison with real live data. So we have the public transport routing system in Austria, where the data are used already. So we compared the result of the routing system with the data from the NeTEx export. And if they are correct, that's good. But this was not every time the case. So we did again a feedback loop and had a look at the correction stuff. And then we have also the data validation tool. So all this action was done in parallel and not sequencer. So we had to change to use the 3 different NeTEx profiles. And we are just using the first one, the NeTEx and the EPIB NeTEx schema. it shows in the beginning different results in the validation of the file. And after the, I think, third version of the validation tool, the logical checks was introduced, which give us the possibility to do very broad data tests in the NeTEx schema, which shows also that some IDs are wrong and missing, and we let correct them too. And the final result, yeah, we have now an data export which is EPIB conform. Excuse me. The manual tests are positive, so I don't have to test it again. And we have the also DATA4PT validated tool positive results. The data export contains more information that is required by the EPIB schema, and it is available on the national access point in Austria. And what is very, I think, cool, that's super, that we got external feedback that our data export is very usable. And this came from Switzerland, which are testing the neighbor NeTEx exports, and yeah, give us a good feedback to it. And at the moment, we are developing some new data bits for the NeTEx export, like the on-demand services. And with this, I say thank you, and if you have questions, let me.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Just one question. You have also the Federal Austrian Railway in your NeTEx.
Yes.
We can use it if you want to.
It's all. It's free for use. But we have at the moment we have a separate also in this NeTEx export file. There's just the time schedules of the railway system, but we have also at the moment the development of the infrastructure as a NeTEx profile, which is now under development, which will come, I think, in the beginning of next year.
Thank you. The last presentation for this panel session is from Norway. So,
yes. Representing ENTUR, company owned by the Ministry of Transport in Norway. This part that I'm going to tell about today is financed, funded by the Ministry of Transport. We're a pretty young company, established in 2016. The process started 2 years earlier with a decision in the Norwegian government that I wanted to have a neutral national journey planner. So there were a project starting up in 2015, 2016, working on the basement of what I want to tell now. ENTUR is responsible for collect all data related to public transport and also now mobility in general. We have the national service for journey planner, which is an important product. We also build a national ticketing system, which is mandatory for the railway to use. And the PTOs are voluntary using it, and more are going that direction. Oh, this is an old version. We have a platform. We have a platform. We have around 110 different data sources sending us data all from PTAs, PTOs, railway operators. We have flights. We have also air cover. We have e-scooters, city bikes, shared cars. What I'm going to tell about now is the route planner and replan part of the platform. We also have a pricing product based on NeTEx. And all the other services we are building is also based as on transmodal NeTEx as much as possible. Slides. This is what we have, how we are done. We have 50 planning systems around Norway. They are today sending native NeTEx. 7 years ago, we had a proprietary Norwegian format that was poor, not solving our use cases. A lot of manual work when we imported that in our national database. We analyzed it, chose NeTEx, said no to conversion. Everyone has to go to their software supplier, order a native NeTEx export. All of the planning systems providers, except one, succeeded on that. The last one is probably going to lose Norway as a market. We started with a Nordic profile, which is built on the French one. We wanted to cover a lot more in the use case. So we had to do more than the French one. That has to build a Norwegian profile. We worked together with Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland in an Odin project. In that process, we asked the other, instead of produce your own profile, is the Norwegian profile covering your use cases? They looked at it, come back. Mostly it does, but we need something else. Then we changed the Norwegian profile, added that use cases, and we established a common change control board for further development of the profile. For Siri, in this pipeline, we have an automatic validation. We have developed it ourselves. It's checked against the NeTEx standard. It checks against the Nordic profile, and it has logical tests as well. We have not. We have decided that they don't want to have an own Nordic XSD, so we use the official SEN XSD. So the check on the NeTEx profile is done by business logic, done in the software. The reason why we don't want to have an own XSD is that we want to make data interoperable. If we do make our own one, we are a little bit similar, different than the other one, and it's very often tempting to, I need to solve something that is not covered fully in the standard. Just add that into my profile, and then we are going on a bad direction, ending up with no interoperable data. Our biggest success factor is the stop register. It was a mess, as almost all of you have today before. We have a backend and a frontend that we maintained. We're responsible for the content, and maintaining that is the different PTOs, railway operators, infrastructure managers, and they use that software to maintain the stop. We have 60,000 stop points, stop places, and 120,000 keys or platforms in the system. all timetable data. The only thing we want to have in the NeTEx for the stop is the national stop ID. Nothing else. All other stops data is added in the data flow afterward. And that was a challenge to convince everyone that that was direct or the right decision. It was hard, tough discussions. Today, everyone is extremely happy about it. It solves almost all of their problems. It's all this is open source. It's on GitHub. We want to collaborate. I think we spend too much money and time to develop stuff that's going to solve the same problem in many ways. We also have the real-time hub collecting real-time data for the operators, added into the OpenTrip Planner, which we are doing a lot of effort on. Open Journey Planner has been mentioned today many times. OpenTrip Planner is not the same. OpenTrip Planner is multimodal trip planner. The last version 2.2 is the last one. It supports both DTFS and NeTEx as input. And that was something we did in the beginning. We received NeTEx data for those producers that produce that. And we received DTFS for the rest. We only validate the NeTEx data. And the people that, the companies that sent us DTFS shipped data in, is shipping data out. And we were open about it. And that gave them the incentive. We need also to produce NeTEx. How can ENTUR help me to do that? So today, everyone is sending NeTEx, except a few small companies, which we have developed an easy planning system for, based on transport on NeTEx. We built it because of the flexible transport on the land transport. We don't believe that a software supplier existing in the Norwegian market for planning system is able to develop that system for many years. So we developed open source based system for maintaining on-demand flexible transport. And we added an easy way of maintaining small data for small operators. So we have today users of that and cover also the smallest operators. Our API is highly used. The OpenTrip Planner has around past 800 million requests per month. We are about 5.4 million people. We don't do that much public transport, but we generate a lot of transport requests. But all the biggest PJs and train operators are using this API in their own channels. We also export DTFS real time. So we are, because it's important for our data sources, that Google, Apple, and other has the correct data. And that's also important for us. The NeTEx profile today contains data that we don't need at ENTUR. It contains sensitive data. So we have enhanced the NeTEx profile to also support blocks, dead runs, and non-publisher services. So the PTAs can send data to us, we validate it. We remove that data in the open data on the net, and we include it in a dataset behind the password. And the PTA is choosing who is access to that dataset. And now you see that the PTAs use the NeTEx and Siri and some situation also the GTFS into their own systems. They use it in the real-time system, use it in the ticket system, they use it for a tendering process. And by that, they are starting to close the circle. They have the right incentive to do the investment to make more data into the NeTEx data, to make it more high quality. The validation is automatic in the pipeline. When they upload the data, NeTEx data set to us, it takes around 60 minutes, and it's out in production and live in the NAP and in the journey panel. Is it error in the validation? We stop the import process. They get automatic log, and we need to correct the errors and try again. If it's warning, it passes. We are now in a process that the data providers starting to get control on the data. So we increase the validation. So warnings today can be errors tomorrow, and we communicate with the PTAs so they have time to correct the errors in the warning sets before we increase the validation too. It's something we should talk about. We have a problem defined. We Google it. Is it an existing solution? No. You write your own solution. Yes. You write it either way. And the newest presentation that we don't have a copy here, remove this, talk to ENTUR.
Talk to ENTUR.
Talk to DATA4PT, talk to your neighboring country. Don't do this by yourself. We all want to solve the same problem. The problem you are struggling now, you probably had a big 12 speeds into a couple of years ago. So this is how we work on open source. The timetable database and the pipeline for validation based on Chouette, French project. We are on that in an own fork. Not possible to go back to the official master fork. I will say that that's our legacy. So if someone is working on something there, we are interested in collaborate. On the real-time hub, started to use wonders away. It didn't solve all our problems. So we use that as inspiration and developed our own real-time hub. Open Tree Planner, we collaborate with the community. everything we do on that is together with the community. That is a success story. On the stock register, we didn't see anything in the markets, so that is developed by ourselves. I think I have this slide is every component in our services, microservices. We have the philosophy that we can take one brick, throw it away, and put in something else. It can be purchased by someone, it can be developed by someone else, it can develop someone else together with someone. But that's an important principle for us. This is the input data side, that's the output. Everything is on GitHub. The last slide. Haven't mentioned the mobility hub. That is also something that we didn't see in the market. We developed that ourselves. It aggregates GigaFS data. Developed 1.5 years ago, before NeTEx was there, part 5. Developed together with the community around mobility data we mentioned earlier today. We have today 40 different sources for that, both e-scooters, city bikes, and shared cars. Our plan is to export NeTEx part 5. And the market is asking for it. I think we're going to stick to GigaFS a little bit more. Maybe we later switch to NeTEx. GigaFS is used in Norway together with MDS for regulation, especially for e-scooters. So you don't want to push the cost of making NeTEx to the that operators at the moment. And the most important part that I haven't heard here today, we all develop or purchase from someone. This is a huge potential if we can do something more together. So that's an open invitation. Yeah. Last time. And if you take a picture of that LinkedIn, you see that the last post today is want to hire a new developer. So mainly work on this pipeline already. NeTEx.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so to conclude, I would like just to invite all panel speakers to just take a seat together. So Fabien, Antonio, Benjamin, Brede, Patrick, and Roberto. Just to take a few minutes more before we can enjoy the networking drink. Yes, to have open discussions around what you just presented, and maybe one first comment here is that, okay, you all presented your validation process, you are running in your data pipeline, and we have seen that you are each using some different type of tools, sometimes proprietary ones, open source ones, unmade tools, DATA4PT open source validation tools as well. So I would like just to have your vision about how you see the next steps. I mean, do you expect a more harmonized process for the validation? Do you expect some maybe governance to maintain such a type of tool and process? Of course, still keeping in mind the national needs and relative profiles. But yes, because also we've seen from some of your presentations that sometimes using different tools is providing different results. So that can become quite challenging. So yeah, just to maybe trigger a discussion around this harmonization of validation process and related tools. So,
I think the main goal for all of us is to produce NeTEx data that someone is going to use, and to use NeTEx data from different data sources, and in our sense, the different maps, they should be interoperable. We talk about OGP, Open Journey Planner, which is one way of doing it. Together with the Nordic countries, we work on a proof of concept where we integrate NeTEx and today GTFS data into the OpenTrip Planner. We believe for neighboring countries today, the hardware and software is good enough to handle that kind of huge data set in one graph, one instance. But to cover today the whole Europe, OGP is the best solution. So regarding the use case, make it easy for a third party that you don't have control over to use the data. And also the validation tools should be, as we have done, automatic somewhere in the pipeline. So we stop data with errors.
Any reactions?
From my side, the validation process is the main input to get a harmonized NeTEx result in the end of the line. Because if you have not the same validation rules and not the same validation interpretation, you get a NeTEx report at the end, but it says not the same as the other NeTEx file, because the interpretation is different. And at the end, what we should have as a harmonization result is that each country has a similar result at the end, which format or which standard, doesn't matter, but it should have the same interpretation values there, so that the neighbor countries or each country can understand it in a correct way. And this understanding is one key factor with the profiles, with the export files, with the standardization, like the API profile. And I think today we got it that if you produce a schema, you define something more than the standard profile. And this more should be also correct interpretable for another country.
And I think is the view that we have different perspectives. One is from public information. Other is the information transfer between stakeholders, operators, authorities, and each country have its own system, and it's difficult to model it in a universal way. Public information is more easy because you have less information. Having less information is better, and for that, the validator tool is very important. One validator can be incorporated in the pipelines direct, because when the standards change, it's not necessary to make programming stuff to change the validate, because that not always work correct. But also the difference what is for the public information and what we change internal. That's internally in the countries. And you can see what is open for the public. One problem that we have in the studies is because our organization is very different of
also for them. It's not so centralized, not very regionalized, so it's difficult.
I agree with the fact that we need something common at the European level. If you give to each member state the possibility to develop its own validators, you are sure that you have at the end different type of NeTEx. So if we have the same validator or the same or common parameters of validation, you can be sure that you have something quite interoperable. If it's not the case, I think at the end, you have a lot of data, but not useful for the neighboring countries. So I think it's better to have something common and to put that on the beginning of the line, to give information directly to the producers in order to correct at the native, in the native system, the information to give a better NeTEx dataset. I think if you have that, perhaps it can be interesting for something like Google to use directly NeTEx and not to make a conversion. If each country has the same way to see NeTEx, perhaps it's a good way to make something mandatory to Google to use NeTEx. At the moment, we have a lot of point of view, not a lot of NeTEx. So it's a good way to them to say, I use NeTEx, GTFS, it's better for me. If all state members are agreed to develop something in common, perhaps it's a good way to put that in place and to have something quite interoperable at a real European scale.
But even VGTS, yes, it's not all the same in all the countries. I saw a lot of different.
Yes,
a lot.
but quite it's simpler.
Yes,
it's simpler also to use, even to develop something to read the GTFS dataset.
But also understand that everybody that reads that NeTEx file is doing an internal conversion for themselves, because for your application, you would like to have a view of the data set that fits with your algorithm. For example, a journey planner will use a different view of your timetables than, for example, a departure application. So everybody is doing a conversion of a source data set to fit their own needs. And that's, so everybody is converting. But the question is your data converting from rich enough to do the conversion in a proper way? And I think we have established that for some of the use cases, GTFS is good enough because you're just building a journey planner on timetables, while some other use cases like accessibility routing would like to have very fine-grained results for specific parts of that journey planner and timetable with validation or validity conditions that a door is open or a door is closed. Trying to model that in GTFS, you can't do that. So then you go to the upstream data where everything is in. And then you see that your internal data model must meet those requirements as well.
Yeah, I agree. But in fact, a lot of applications just need a basic level of data. So it's simpler to read the GTFS, and you can do that in NeTEx. But with NeTEx, you have a whole range of information. It's a bit complicated to read. And if you want to develop something to read the NeTEx, you have to develop the same at a European level. It's impossible to develop one tool to read NeTEx in France or to read NeTEx quite it's the same profile in Norvegia, etc. You need something in common. It's impossible for each application developer to have a NeTEx tool for reading for each situation in Europe.
I agree that we need one validation tool, but this means also one profile at the end, one European profile. So we will now, shortly, we will export the German profile, the Italian profile, and the European passenger information profile. And that's really what we always see as a disadvantage. So we lose a lot of speed of harmonizing it. And the second point, what I would like to point out, so what we showed today is not about data quality in the data exchange format, it starts much before. It starts really at the point where you create data in the databases. And there we need also, we don't need only the validation of the data exchange format, but we need some style guides, some guidelines, how we create data. Just one of you pointed out the stop register. Was it you? Yeah. I think for us it was always clear. It was always like this for 30 years that we had some technicians. They defined the stops in our region. Only them, not the operator. So we had a lot of troubles. We didn't have any troubles about that. So, but then when we first exchanged data with the region, with the neighbor region, it was a big mess. So we really have to go back at the point where we start to create data. That's really important.
As an example of that, we have done on surveillance, field surveillance for all the bus stops. So we have a common, the bus stop is also a common base for all the stakeholders. And we start to planning and design the things from that fixed frame. And when the municipality change, they give to us, we give the key, the ID, the name, etc. And we put in our model and start to construct the lines, the links, everything. And that is absolutely necessary.
And what we didn't have time to talk about today is supporting tools, which DTFS world has a tremendous lead with existing solutions that is easy to use to start to produce data, use data, and also change data on the way. In the NeTEx world, we need to develop and use much more of the same tools and make it available to parties to use them to produce the correct quality and richness.
I would like also to add a point to this discussion. We have discussed a lot about data standards, data quality, but at the end, what we want to deliver to end users is a service. So, and I think that for the future development, we are all together working about, it is important that we have also high quality OGP services. So you talked about, we are also working about that. And I think if you want, then third parties use this, we should let them use more a service like OGP service more than the data itself. It's important to let them as open data, of course, but if you wanted to have, for example, a cross-border journey planning system across Europe with high quality data, much more accurate, for example, than Google, then we have to work on, for example, OGP at a European profile for OGP, so that we provide a service that third parties can use and provide the service to end users. Because otherwise, if we don't think at real use cases, it's just it could be just a theoretical use case to just provide this data as export data, and let's hope that the parties can use them. But I think if we have a real use cases in mind, could be much more quick in deliver, let's say, also the objectives of the European Commission. So also my suggestion, let's work together for a European profile for OGP, for example, because this could help a lot to speed up all these kind of activities that we are currently discussing. So please also think about that.
Yeah, that's a good point. All about the ambition level that different countries, organization has. Our ambition is that the traveler should find correct information in the platform or app that they want to choose to use.
Absolutely.
And we have control on just a few of those apps. So we must have extremely high control over the data. And important. We have the journey planner OTP API that we encourage most of them to use, but it's still important that they have the freedom to choose something else.
But you have the right strategy because you provide both the data and the services.
Yeah.
So the OTP API, the OGP probably also should. So you have both possibilities, and a third party can use both of them. I think that we have also to jump, just not to provide the data, but also the services. I think this is a step also in the mind that we have to do together.
And that was also the important key that the PTAs started to deliver data to ENTUR, use the API in their own app, and then started to use the data into their own system. Without the TRIP API, they have never going to start to use the data for us because they have never put the effort to produce the data quality needed.
That is a question for Miguel. There is not entry point for only that. If you don't know the RAD or the story, I can use it. I have to go deeper with the services wanted.
Just in addition, Austria is also an OGP.
Yeah. So it's already coming, but we are in the linking arts project, but we see that there is a lot to do to have a common, let's say, OGP understanding, let's say. So I think we have really to focus now on services. So that's my input, because we can be quicker if we think in that direction.
No.
So I can add to this. I agree with you, and by providing services, we can also persuade all this public passenger transport services to deliver their data in the NeTEx form.
Exactly.
Because we will have them. Okay, look, it works. Please use please take the NeTEx standard and provide the data.
Great, so that's a good point for the next year in DATA4PT to continue to support the stakeholders in the adoption of transmodel ecosystem, which includes OGP as well. So it's already 10 to 5, so it's now time to close this stakeholder forum and then to enjoy a networking drink. It will be also opportunity to continue, of course, discussions. By the way, we have today 2 experts in the room from the DATA4PT team, so Stefan, Deconic, and NeTEx. So yes, you are of course very welcome to discuss with both of them to get more detailed, let's say, information around the transmodel ecosystem implementation. So before I give the floor to you, Anders, to say the last words, I just would like to thank you, our panel speakers today. It was, yes, already great to have you with us, Patrick, Janine, Rede, Fabien, Antonio, and Roberto. Thanks as well to European Commission, Victoire and Petra, for joining and for your great support in DATA4PT and NAVCore as well. Thank you to UITP for the organization today and all the logistic staff. That was very great done. Thanks to all of you joining physically here in Brussels, and thanks to all others joining remotely. I hope you enjoy it. And yes, we strongly expect to see you quite soon in flesh for next coming events. So thanks everyone, and so we can now enjoy the the networking drink. But please, Anders.
I think the only thing that remains for me is now to say thank you to you and for all your energy behind this. So keep the energy up.